الحمد لله رب العالمين اللهم إنا نحمدك ونستعينك ونستغفرك ونستهديك ونتوب إليك ونثني عليك الخير كله اللهم لك الحمد كله ولك الملك كله بيدك الخير كله إليك يرجع الأمر كله علانيته وسره فأحسنا تحمد إنك على كل شيء قدير اللهم اغفر لي جميع ما مدى من ذنوبي وعصمني فيما بقي من عمري وارزقني عملا زاكيا ترضى به عني. We seek Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's mercy this morning as we reflect on His book in one of His houses, and we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make the Qur'an the spring and the light of our hearts, to help us understand His book and act upon it, and to be those who would be resurrected on the day of Qiyamah within His pleasure. Imam Muslim brought a hadith in his Sahih on the authority of Sayyidina Abu Hurairah radiyallahu anhu. I have mentioned this specific part of the hadith before in our classes, the one that says, وَمَا اجْتَمَعَ قَوْمٌ فِي بَيْتٍ مِّن بِيُوتِ اللَّهِ يَتْلُونَ كِتَابَ اللَّهِ وَيَتَدَارَسُونَهُ بَيْنَهُمْ إِلَّا نَزَلَتْ عَلَيْهِمُ السَّكِينَةُ وَغَشِيَتْهُمُ الرَّحْمَةُ وَحَفَّتْهُمُ الْمَلَائِكَةُ وَذَكَرَهُمُ اللَّهُ فِي مَنْ عِندَهُ وَمَنْ بَدَأَ بِهِ عَمَلُهُ لَمْ يُسْرِ بِهِ نَسَبُهُ. It's a compound hadith that Imam Muslim brings in the kitab of Az-Zikr, Wa-Du'a, Wa-Tawbah, Wal-Istighfar. In the book of remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, supplication, asking for forgiveness and for tawbah. And it's a compound hadith in which Prophet ﷺ says that one nafasa an mu'min kurbatan min kurabi dunya nafasallahu anhu kurbatan min kurbi yawmil qiyamah. Many things are mentioned of believers who reach out to other believers, who try to remove some of the hardships of this dunya, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would remove the hardships in the hereafter. And the one who walks on the path of learning knowledge, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes it easy for him to walk towards the path of Jannah. So in itself, it requires a reflection. Why would Imam Muslim have a hadith about gatherings in the houses of Allah, وَيَتَدَارَسُونَهُ بَيْنَهُمْ, and learning from each other of the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, along with these other things that happen? And this is all because, one aspect of it is because we are not individual, isolated, free-floating, free radicals in this dunya. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made an ummah, He made an ummah so that there are relationships between the believers. And all of these aspects of going or removing the hardship from another believer, learning and teaching the Qur'an, all of these are parts of that whole bigger framework of believers interacting with each other for dunya and for akhirah. So there are deep connections, but the part that is today of focus, that the Prophet ﷺ has told us that when we gather in one of His houses of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for the purpose of يَتَدَارَسُونَ بَيْنَهُمْ, between us, and I learn from you and you learn from me, you learn from each other, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sends the sakina, tranquility, mercy, angels surround them, and the most of all, He mentioned those who gather for this purpose in the other world, among those who are closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala than we are, the malaika, the awliya. So we seek, this morning, we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant us the ability, the tawfiq and the ikhlas, the sincerity with which we undertake this session today, so that we are mentioned in places where mentioning really matters for us, for dunya and for akhirah. Today we want to do two things: continuing the theme of creation and reflecting on the connections between the theme of creation in the Qur'an with other themes in the Qur'an. And one of those themes is the theme of guidance. الذي خلقني فهو يهدين والذي هو يطعمني ويسقين وإذا مرضت فهو يشفين. الذي خلقني فهو يهدين. This 78th ayah of Surah Al-Shura is quoting Sayyidina Ibrahim alayhi salam. In this particular context, he is describing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Alladhi khalaqani fahuwa yahdeen. The one who created me and the one who guides me. Creation is connected with guidance. In this description of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by Ibrahim alayhi salam, when when Fir'aun asks Musa alayhi salam, قَالَ فَمَنْ رَبُّكُمَا يَا Musa? What is the response of Sayyidina Musa? قَالَ رَبُّنَا الَّذِي أَعْطَى كُلَّ شَيْءٍ خَلْقَهُ ثُمَّ هَدَى. Rabbuna allazi, our Rabb, is the one who granted everything, who gave everything, kulla shayin, khalaqahu, he created. Thumma hada, then he guided. Imam Razi says that the theme of creation is so intimately connected with the theme of guidance in the Qur'an that the most of the prophets used the relationship between the creation and guidance in their teachings. And he says that if you reflect on the very first revelation that came to the Prophet ﷺ, Ikra bismi rabbika alladhi khalaq, khalaqal insana min alaq, Ikra wa rabbukal akram alladhi allama bil qalam. Allama al-insana ma lam ya'lam. Guidance through teaching. Khalaq al-insana min alaq, he created insan from alaq, and then he taught bil qalam, with the pen. And teaching is, he says, guidance. In Surah Al-Ala we have Sabbi isma rabbikal ala alladhi khalaqa fasawwa walladhi qaddara fahada. Again we have the connection between the creation and guidance in the beginning of this surah. Walladhi qaddara fahada. The relationship between creation and guidance is further, he says, this is typically Razi's deep thinking in terms of asking questions and then answering. So he says, we understand the creation to be يكون الخلق عبارة عن تركيب القوالب والأبدان والهدايا عبارة عن إبداع القوى المدركة والمحركة في تلك الأجسام. وعلى هذه التقدير يكون الخلق مقدما على الهدايا. فلذلك قال فإذا سويته ونفخت فيه من روحي. He says that if we reflect on the creation, we see that the coming into existence of bodies is the first act. Putting the ability to receive guidance is part of the creation, but this happens through al-quwa. It happens through the opening, through the actualization of these faculties that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has put into the creation, the guidance. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, creates, and then and that's the first part. But he says, when we will shuru fi bayani ajaib hikmatillahi fil khalqi wal hadaya shuru fi bahri la sahila lahu. Same thing that Imam Ghazali told us a century before Razi, that if the wonders of creation, if we start reflecting on the wonders of creation, its explanation is an ocean la sahila lahu, which has no shore. If you dip into the wonders of creation, there is no way to come out. So the purpose of reflection on the creation in terms of gaining guidance is to go to the point where the heart has received the guidance that was intended for that reflection. Otherwise, your life will be wasted in just the reflection without benefiting from it, because there is no end to the ajaib. There is no end to the wonders in Allah's creation. And this is constant. What we learn from this is that this is not just one single scholar saying this, that you need to reflect, but you don't need to be lost in the haira, in the wonder of reflection. Like itself, becomes a prison. Is that point clear? The purpose remains straightforward. These people, their basira is just out of our minds. Their purpose was, they were so focused. What is this that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying? Is actually to gain the guidance and act upon it and live our lives according to it, not just be the investigators as we see now. You open up any page on Wikipedia on the mosquito, on the fly, on any little thing or any great thing, the cosmos, endless information everywhere. And this information is not made up. This information is sum total of 400 years of scientific investigation, systematic. Like this has taken lives of thousands and thousands of individuals to put together this one little thing about why the mosquito bites. Just like how the scaffolding happens of knowledge. People who are lost in just that investigation, down to the level of the atomic structure and all of those things, they didn't gain anything. Most of them didn't gain anything. That's why the civilization became what it became. Their purpose was just to find out what is the chemistry of this bite. That was their focus. But these people are saying, all of them are saying, like our scholars, if you go, innaka iza nazartu ila ajaib an-nahl fi tarkib al-biyut. Again, Imam Razi is giving the example of the bee. في تركيب البيوت المسدسة وعجائب أحوال البق والبعوض. And he says, this buck is a very interesting word that he uses. it's used for, like in this case, he's using it for the bed bug. But bug, bug itself in Arabic, it's just something that is a lot, a quantity that is extreme. So, Bakal Nisa, the woman who gives lots of children is called Bak. The one who speaks too much is called Bakal Kalam. Speech is too much. So, well, Ba'uda, the fly. And he says, if you just look at the bed bug and the fly, إلى مسال أنفسها لعرفت عن ذلك لا يمكن إلا بالإلهام مدبر عالم بجميع المعلومات. He says that if you were to reflect on the bug, bed bug, or the fly, you will reach the conclusion that what they do, what they have in their beings, how they are created, is impossible without the guidance coming from the Mudabbir ul Alim bi Jamiul Malumat, from the Mudabbir is one of the attributes that are used for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the one who arranges the affairs. He says it's impossible for these little creatures to have the abilities to do what they do without the maker, Jamiul Malumat, of all the information that is there. So the connection between what the bed bug is doing and what the fly is doing, he says, if you reflect on that, it's impossible for them to do what they're doing without someone arranging the affairs of the bed bug with the same framework, with the same information, with the same plan as is operative in the rest of the creation. So what he's pointing to, and then he gives example after example, and I find this, this is before the rise of modern science and with all the information. He says, يَسْتَخْرِجُونَ الْحَدِيدِ مِنَ الْجِبَالِ. If you look at the people, if you look at human beings, what they take out of al-hadid, iron, and what they make of it, you will reach the conclusion that فَثَبَّتَ أَنَّهُ سُبْحَانَهُ وَالَّذِي خَلَقَ كُلُّ الْأَشْيَاءِ ثُمَّ أَعْطَاهُمْ الْعُقُولَ الَّتِي بِهَا يَتَوَسَّلُونَ إِلَى كَيْفِيَّةِ الْإِنْتِفَاعِ. You will reach the conclusion that it is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala who has created خَلَقَ كُلُّ الْأَشْيَاءِ, every single thing. Then He gave them aqul, the intellects, intelligence, to extract benefit from what He has created. And all of this, he says, is for the purpose of guidance. So, example after example in our tradition, we have connection between the theme of creation and guidance. So, as I said, today our session is just to receive that two things. Number one, what is the connection between the purpose of the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which is to guide humanity, and the theme of creation. So the theme of creation is intimately connected with the theme of guidance. That's number one. And we can give example after example as they give in our tradition. But we want to move on to the next and the second part of today's session. And this, I really hope that every one of us really internalizes this part, because without the internalization of this part, the whole theme is going to be totally flat. So it's very important that we internalize this part, and this part is to deal with the first of the words used in the Qur'an for creation. You remember that was khalaqa. So we really want to understand what khalaqa is. This is so important for us to make the conceptual scheme, semantic meaning, and the various usages of the word khalaqa, which is the most used word in the Qur'an for the theme of creation. So where do we go? Where do we start? We go to our Ustad, Raghav al-Asfahani, and Mufradat, remember the book I mentioned? There are other books, but in terms of conceptual understanding of the vocabulary of the Quran, there is nothing comparable to Mufradat al-Quran. And there is an English kind of diffused English version through Lane's lexicon, which is available online. Mr. Lane, the British, he put a huge effort into extracting classical sources, classical dictionaries, extracting his dictionary from the classical sources, and it's useful. It's a useful resource. It's online. It's made in recent years searchable and all the rest of it. But we go to Imam Raghib Isfahani, and his tafsir is also very important, although it's not complete. The definition of khalq. Ha lam qaf. Al khalqu asluhu at taqdirul mustaqim. He says the asl, the root of khalq is taqdirul mustaqim. Al taqdirul mustaqim is, al mustaqim is just mustaqim, straight. Al taqdir is from qadara, which is to measure, proportion. Mustaqim, so coherent proportioning would be an approximate translation of what Imam Raghib is saying. Al-Taqdir al-Mustaqim, coherent proportioning. In order to internalize this Al-Taqdir al-Mustaqim, you see, there is a whole, the whole theme of creation is built into just these two words, Al-Taqdir al-Mustaqim. When we say khalq is creation, we get nothing. What we have done is taken an Arabic word and put an English word. And when we think of creation, what do we think? What comes to our mind is just the emergence of something. Like creation is just the emergence of something. But he says that khalq actually is used in two ways in the Qur'an. One of them is وَيُسْتَعْمَلُ فِي إِبْدَاءِ الشَّيْءِ مِنْ غَيْرِ أَصْلٍ وَلَا اقْتِدَاءٍ. One of the true aspects in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has used the word khalq in the Quran is in the sense of badi, as we said previously last time, fi ibda, to bring into existence something from nothing. That's one aspect. And the example is khalaqa samawati wal ard. And that is in the sense of badi'u samawati wal ard, in the sense of creation, in the sense of bringing into existence something from nothing. And in the second, when something is brought into existence from another thing. And the example of that, he says, وَيُسْتَعْمَلُ فِي إِيجَادِ الشَّيْءِ مِنْ شَيْءٍ, and is used for the ijad, for the bringing into existence of one thing from another, as in خَلَقَكُم مِّن نَفْسٍ وَاحِدَةٍ. He created you from one nafs. In Surah Al-Nisa, وَخَلَقَ الْإِنسَانَ مِن نُطْفَةٍ. He created you from one nafs, meaning he created us from an existing nafs, or He created us from nutfa, which was an existing thing. وَخَلَقَ الْإِنسَانَ مِنْ سُلَالَةٍ وَلَقَدْ خَلَقْنَاكُمْ خَلَقَ الْجَانَ مِنْ مَارِجٍ مِنْ نَارٍ. He created the jinn from the marij. So one thing, marij already existing, converted into jinn. Sulala existing, converting into. So these are the two ways, he says, fundamental ways. In the first sense of the usage of the word khalq, it is only for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. لَيْسَ الْخَلْقُ الَّذِي هُوَ الْإِبْدَاعُ إِلَّا لِلَّهِ تَعَالَى. You cannot use the word khalq in the sense of creating from nothing for anyone, and he says, this we reach, this we understand, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala himself says, أَفَمَنْ يَخْلُقُ كَمَنْ لَا يَخْلُقُ أَفَلَا تَذَكَّرُونَ Surah Al-Nahl, ayah number 17, he says, the one who creates, is he equal to the one who does not create? So the word khalq here refers to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the first sense, and everyone else in the other sense. So the distinction between Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the rest of the what He has created at this level is between the ability to bring into existence from nothing, which no one else can do. So this is the first. As far as the second aspect is concerned, he says that فَقَدْ جَعَلَهُ اللَّهُ تَعَالَى لِغَيْرِهِ فِي بَعْضِ الْأَحْوَالِ. The usage of khalq, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has used it for others, like Isa alayhi salam, when he says, وَتَخْلُقُ مِنَ التِّينِ كَهَيَّةِ الطَّيْرِ بِإِذْنِي. When I create for you the like of a bird from mud, from teen, and remember, every time Isa alayhi salam says all of these things in this beautiful passage where he's saying, he's doing all of these things, everything ends with bi-izni, with the permission of Allah. He is creating a bird. Isa alayhi salam, a human being in this dunya, making just this mud and a slash of fly, like a real bird. Every time it's mentioned, the Qur'an is mentioned with bi-izni, with the permission of. So he says, Imam Raghib says that وَالْخَلْقُ لَا يُسْتَعْمَلُ فِي كَافَةِ النَّاسِ إِلَّا عَلَى وَجْهَيْنِ. No matter who this human being is, khalq is not used except in the two senses of creation. So number one, he says, as the poet says, فَلْيَنْتَ تَكْرِي مَا خَلَقْتَ وَبَعْدُ الْقَوْمِ يَخْلُقُ ثُمَّ لَا يَفْرِي. He says that, as the poet says, that some people talk and they create in the air, but they don't act upon it. And some people talk and they act upon it, and then they create something. So in the first sense is just in the sense in which Isa alayhi salam says he creates. Then the second is tahlukuna ifkan. He says that it's a beautiful connection that you don't tahlukuna ifka. Surah Al-Kabut, they create tahlukuna ifka. What is ifk? Ifk, remember the ifk is the falsehood. It's the false attribution. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that you, to human beings, you create falsehood. So the connection between the real creator and the pseudo creators, the false creators, that they create falsehood. Now this makes everything very clear, that the word khalq is used in the Qur'an in two senses. One is in the sense of bringing into creation from nothing. And in the Qur'an, the word khalq is used only for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in that sense. The second is to bring something into creation from an existing thing, in which case human beings are included. Somebody creates something. A poet creates poetry from something which is what? Two things. We always think of creation in terms of material things, but there are other. A poet creates a couplet. There are two things in that couplet. One is the vocabulary, the actual words which are part of a language. The second is the idea that the poet has put into this couplet. Did he create the idea? Did he create the language? No. Why? Because remember last time we said Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created two kinds of creation, material and non-material. Khalaqal earth, He created the earth, which is a material. Wa khalaqal mawta wal hayata, He created death and He created life. He created happiness. He created huzn. He created beauty. Remember we said all of that? Now what did the poet do? He took some of those abstract things like the beauty, the huzn, the sorrow, the grief, the joy, some of those things, put it in the couplet, in the form of the word. So the couplet has a qalib, it has a body, like we have bodies. The body is the language, the words of a given language. What's in those words is also created by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's clear that khalq is used for none other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the sense of ability given by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to the humans to create something out of something. Create this table out of a tree, create a couplet out of the languages, etc. So once this understanding is clear, look at the depth of Imam al-Raghib. He says, وَإِنْ كِيلَ قَوْلُهُ فَتَبَارَكَ اللَّهُ أَحْسَنُ الْخَالِقِينَ. If it is said that what you are saying is true, then how do you explain this Tabarakallahu ahsanul khaliqeen? Allah is the best of creators. He is the best of creators. Does it not mean that there are other creators in the same sense in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is? This definition would raise this question of how do you and he says, look at the honest, look at the strength, the himmah. SubhanAllah. If you just reflect on this one, يدل على أنه يصح أن يوصف غيره بالخلق. This ayah points to this thing, to this idea that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala yusafu ghayruhu bil khalq. Allah has said that there are other creators. And he says, no, if you say this, then you are not understanding Ahsanul Khaliqeen in the right sense, because Ahsanul Khaliqeen means Ahsanul Muqaddireen. Ahsanul Muqaddir. Now, if we go back to his original definition of Khalq, which is Asluhu At-Taqdeerul Mustaqim, the original meaning of Khalq is Taqdeerul Mustaqim, which we said is the coherent proportioning. Coherent proportioning, meaning Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has coherently proportioned the entirety of creation. Within that entirety of creation, He has coherently proportioned individual creations like you and me and the bedbug and the ankabut and every little thing. And entirety of the creation, He has also coherently proportioned. Muqaddireen, Ahsan Muqaddireen. And he says that's impossible for any human being. Anyone other than Allah cannot do that. So Ahsanul Khaliqeen here refers to Ahsanul Muqaddireen. Because human beings can do muqaddir, like when they built this thing, they muqaddir, they took X amount of drywall and X amount of wood and X amount, they muqaddireen, they said, okay, this building would need this amount of wood or this amount of other stuff, right? That's the qadr, that's the proportion. So, and second, when he says that, it also, look at the humility here. He doesn't claim anything. This is really something. He says it could also be possible that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying this, فَتَبَارَكَ اللَّهُ أَحْسَنَ الْخَالِقِينَ عَلَى تَقْدِيرِ مَا كَانُوا يَعْتَقِدُونَ وَيَزْعُمُونَ Anna ghayrallahi yubdi'. It could be that he, subhanahu wa ta'ala, is specifically addressing those listeners of the Qur'an who believed that there are other yubdi, there are other originators. So he is refuting the claim of those who were called the mubdi'een and mujideen. فَاللَّهُ أَحْسَنُهُمْ إِيجَادًا عَلَى مَا يَعْتَقِدُونَ. And then he says, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, فَاللَّهُ أَحْسَنُهُمْ إِيجَادًا عَلَى مَا يَعْتَقِدُونَ. According to their beliefs, when he says خَلَقُ كَخَلْقِهِ فَتَشَابَهَ الْخَلْقُ عَلَيْهِمْ. And he says that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala brings a second refutation of their belief, of their false belief. خَلَقُ كَخَلْقِهِ فَتَشَابَهَ الْخَلْقُ عَلَيْهِمْ. So they created and they confused their own little creation with the creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and there is no correspondence between two kinds of creation. These are of different order of creation. What about the ayah that says, وَلَا مُرَنَّهُمْ وَلَا يُغَيِّرُنَّ خَلْقَ اللَّهِ. When the shaitan says that I will command them and they will change the creation of Allah in Surah An-Nisa. So what do we make of this ayah then? If shaitan commands, he claims that I will tell human beings and they will change your creation. So are they not changing by changing the creation, they are also becoming creators. And somebody said this, creators and co-creators. This is a Christian theological take on cosmology, that human beings are co-creators. Co-creators, like co is equal. So what about this taghayyur? What about this? So فَقَدْ كِيلَ إِشَارَةُ إِلَى مَا يُشَبَّهُونَهُ مِنَ الْخِلْقِهِ بِالْخِسَاءِ. So he gives the example of damaging the creation. Like the castration, for example, he says. When you change something of the creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you are changing the function of that something, like people did. So you are not changing the creation, you are only damaging one particular species or one particular item of the creation by chopping off the hands or ears or whatever people are doing. And he says that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has said this in Surah Rum, La tabdeela li khalqillah. They cannot tabdeel, they cannot change what Allah has created. The creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala cannot be changed. La tabdeela li khalqillah. And this is Wakila mana la tabdila khalqayyul la taghayyiru khalqallah. So he says that it's impossible to for any human being to change the creation. Now, one last thing is this is again linguistic, but it's very important for us to internalize this. In Surah Al-Qalam, we have a description of the Prophet ﷺ, وَإِنَّكَ لَعَلَى خُلُقٍ عَظِيمٍ. The change in the vowelization of the kha, lam, qaf here, khalaqa, and this is khulq with the silent lam, khulq. This is a very difficult ayah to translate. وَإِنَّكَ لَعَلَى خُلْقٍ عَظِيمٍ, and it's normally translated as you are on a great khulq. You are normally they translate as referring to the character of the Prophet ﷺ. You are on a great character, like your character is exalted. That meaning is there, but the connection between creation, between khalq and khulq, is that khalq refers to the creation which is the embodiment, in this case of insan, of human beings. Khulq is something within that body. So the entirety of the like the aql, the qalb, the ability to reflect, ability to deal with other human beings, everything in the creation within the creation is khulq. So khalq and khulq, these two things, is it clear? It's a little bit difficult, but is it clear? Yes? Okay. So we are going to, inshallah, stop soon. If we could just end at the eight derivatives. So khulq is one of those in the Qur'an. There are 261 usages of khalq, and we just stop at the mentioning of these 8 forms of this root, so that the spectrum of the usage is clear to us. Most of these are in the verbal form of to create, khalaqa, most of the 184. Twice it's used in the intensive noun as khallaq, and both times the supreme, both times as khallaqul alim, the supremely knowing creator, referring to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone. So Allah's knowledge and the creation, khallaq, al-khallaqul alim. Alim is the superlative form of alim, the one who knows, and khallaq is the superlative form of the one who creates. So 2 superlatives combined to describe Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as al-khallaqul alim. 6 times it's used as khalaq without the intensification, just the khalaq, the noun, and in that sense it is share. And twice, as we just said, it's used as khuluq, which is It's very difficult to translate it, but moral character or the inner non-material being, hulk. And huluk, See the difference between huluk, meaning there is dhamma on lam as well. Huluk, all three are vowelized. All three letters have the diacritic on it, the huluk. And hulk is creation. Hulk and huluk, meaning just changing one middle letter from dhamma to schoon changes hugely the meaning of the word. Arabic is just so rich, it's just. And then it refers to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as Khaliq. It's one of the names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. 12 times. Al-Khaliq. Mukhallaq is used twice. This is a passive participle, mukhallaq, which means the formed, the shaped, the one that is the end result of the process of creation. And once it's used as ikhtilaq, which is fabrication. Fabrication, something that is concocted, that is false, but something is just fabricated. That's called ikhtilaq. Because it's created, so the connection between creation and even a false pseudo idea or belief. So inshallah stop here, and next time we are going to go through the hierarchy of creation. Remember we mentioned in brief passing at the very beginning of the creation theme that we will go into hierarchy of creation. And we said that there are several kinds of hierarchies. One is serial in terms of time. What is created first, what is created after. Second is hierarchy of ontological hierarchy, meaning maratibal mawjudat. And then there are degrees of being, degrees of what has been created, maratibal wujud. And there are very fine distinctions between these. And then there are spiritual hierarchies, meaning those who are nearer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and those who are removed from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. These are creations, these are like existing creations, like the angels. And within angels, then Jibreel alayhi salam, Israel, all those other names of the angels mentioned in the Qur'an. And then there are mukarrabeen. We hope Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will grant us the ability and tawfiq to be among the mukarrabeen, inshallah. Are there any questions?
So I do have a question when it comes to the creation of language. Because in linguistic anthropology, language has been created specifically to the space and how humans are connected to that particular space. Now, I'm not doubting for a second that that is a creation of Allah. But how is it in the Qur'an and the scholars, have they connected those two things?
So the question is, language is creation within a space at a time in the history. It's connected with, it is created within a specific group of human beings living at a specific place, specific time.
Yeah.
And how is it connected with the Quranic understanding of creation of language as such? When we have this initial description in the Qur'an of the creation of the first human being, Adam alayhi salam, one of the fascinating aspects of that narration is connected with the naming of things. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَعَلَّمَهُ أَسْمَاءَ كُلِّ شَيْءٍ, He taught Adam alayhi salam the names of all things. Language, in every language, especially in the Arabic, when they break down the language, they say there are three things in a language. One, we did this when we were doing the asma. The first is the noun, the name. The language consists of nouns, ism, asma. Second is actions, verbs. And the third is harf, the particles. Our understanding, like our traditional understanding of language, is that anything that is of permanent nature, permanent within the human parameters, the only thing that is permanent is the ism, the name. And that is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala taught Adam alayhi salam. Everything else is connected with time. All the actions, when we say khalaqa, he created, or when we say he will create, everything else, they say, is related to time. And it comes and it goes, whereas the ism remains, and it will remain until the end of time. Everything that exists. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala taught Adam alayhi salam, and that the Fasirs on that particular passage actually mention Sayyidina Ibn Abbas saying that this was an actual presentation of all the things that Allah had created. He taught the name. He said, this is a horse, this is an elephant, this is this.
If I may though.
Yes.
So then why do we have so many distinct languages? Right? So, because I'm trying to reconcile that a group of human beings in a particular space would create their own language. Like, I don't have a doubt that, because I believe that words are sacred, therefore they come from Allah. They come into our hearts and we use them, right? But then why all the diversity of languages? That's what I'm trying to reconcile.
So one of the verses, I think we mentioned this before in the case of when we were discussing the concept of beauty. Diversity, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, He created humanity with diverse languages and colors. The ayah says that in this diversity of your languages and your colors, al-sinatukum, in your languages. So the connection between what you are saying of this anthropological view of languages versus the Quranic view of languages is to take the specificity of time and place, or put the specificity of time and space within the hierarchy of, number one, the fundamental knowledge of names of things given to Adam alayhi salam, diversifying in the serial time as day after day, century after century, group of human beings after human beings, a place, a space, manifesting that allamahul bayan, that ability that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put in the original human beings to express our desires, hopes, wishes, concepts, whatever we need to express, allamahul bayan, through the ability of this bayan, to ability to speak. The ability to ability to speak then becomes culturally rooted within a time and a place. Each culture bringing its own associations with the words. So, these our brothers here, Aboriginal people, when they say snow in their languages, the associations that come with one word of Allah's creation, snow, into that language are specific to those people, which wouldn't come to somebody who's born and raised in India and hasn't left that place, where hasn't seen snow or have heard about the snow, but it's a foreign experiential reality. People who live with the snow for generations and generations, and who dealt with the snow, and who built their snow homes, and who built their igloos, and who lived in the igloos, there for them, that word, that expression, that diversity. So the diversity of the languages manifesting in human history serially still goes back to the initial abilities Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave for Allama al-Bayan. So in the creation, diversity, the theme of diversity itself, inshallah, we'll pay attention to that in one concentrated session. What does it mean that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created everything in multiple forms, diversity, and how that connects with the Qur'an itself? Because when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that He has explained the book in diverse ways, the same thing is repeated in many, many forms. Is that?
Alhamdulillah.
I want you to correct me if I got this wrong. So what I understood, that understanding Islam or Quran or everything is a scientific process, or it should be a scientific process, not a philosophical process where you are just engaged in arguments. But it should be a scientific process that you observe, you think about it, and then you come to a conclusion. Is that safe to say?
Let me just repeat the question for the online participants, because the sound doesn't carry. The question is it sound to say that we should approach the understanding of the Quran in a scientific way rather than a philosophical way? Is that correct?
More in a scientific way than philosophical.
More of a scientific way, and the scientific way is to observe and
think about it, experiment, and then come to conclusion.
So, and the philosophical way would be?
Just arguing, right? Just you take one thing and you keep arguing about it. Because the understanding the Quran is a field in its own, the terminology used in that field is different from philosophical or scientific. These two terms are from different fields. Scientific or philosophical are from different fields. So one way of reaching some clarity would be to use the terms used in our tradition for the process of understanding the Quran, rather than use these other terms which have their own associations with them. The scientific methodology of observation, reflection and conclusion, induction and deduction basically, these are two broad methodologies. And philosophical methodology is
to argue in a systematic manner.